Most of us know what a cultural imperialism means, but just in case, a cultural imperialism means imposing a dominant foreign culture by military force on a weaker nation. In recent past, example of cultural imperialism has been witnessed in India, Africa, and Middle East, where European nations have been dominant foreign powers. This cultural imperialism was an essential part of the colonialism. In earlier history, Greeks were known for cultural imperialism in Mediterranean region, including Italy. After Greeks, Roman Empire imposed their culture in the region. Spanish Empire also tried to wipe out native culture from South and Central Americas. Post-World War, the Americans are accused of the cultural imperialism. Interestingly, the Soviet cultural imperialism stayed under the radar. A cultural imperialism influences every major aspect of a society. This influence includes religion, economics, political systems, style of dressing and clothing, art and literature, media, education, health, and languages. There are three major elements of a classic cultural imperialism that must be kept in mind. Firstly, role of foreign authority. Secondly, fabricating moral grounds or justifications to garner support of the masses before use of force to impose a dominant culture. Thirdly, actual use of force to impose a dominant foreign culture. Expansion of a religion and gaining economy has remained major justification in garnering support of the public for use of force against subjugated nations' cultural transformation. Spread of Christianity was a popular argument for European public. Cheap labor and expanded tax base for other crowd pullers. Spread of democracy and human rights were also used as justifications. Indeed, some ideas used in cultural imperialism sounded very attractive. However, if ideas are not spread organically, rather enforced by use of military force, the subject people feel resentment against the good ideas too. When people are convinced through their own experiences, instead of being told by a stranger what are good values or practices for them, they love it and adopt such values and practices without any conflict. A lesson in this regard was learned by Americans, according to New York Times, when US government under pressure from LGBTQ voters spent over $350 million on supporting gay rights in sub-Saharan Africa, but they have been less than successful. President Obama, again under pressure from LGBTQ activists pushing gay rights in Kenya and Nigeria, infuriated the local leadership, and instead stricter laws were passed against gays in Nigeria. That was the consequence of telling others what values were good for them. They only get resentment in return. Now let's briefly see a few glaring examples of cultural imperialism which remains as a stain in human history till today. One could argue that the ancient Roman Empire is an early example of cultural imperialism. In its conquest of Italy, the Roman Empire imposed Latin on the people of Etruria, replacing the Etruscan language, which ultimately led to the demise of the language and other aspects of the Etruscan culture. The expansion of the British Empire during the 18th and 19th centuries is another example. It was not only economic and political form of imperialism, but also a cultural one. This was carried out inter alia through imposition of Christianity on cultures with other religions. The British Empire also extended its cultural power through imposing educational material on the colonies, promoting the empire through books and syllabus. The greatest example of cultural imperialism was witnessed in America, which is the native tribes' ownership of casinos on their land granted by federal laws. Other influences were guns, the spreading of smallpox, and the introduction of alcohol. Native tribes were free of all such vices prior to the influence of white European culture. All of the above changes had grave consequences for the native people. Also, the native North American tribes were forced onto reservations, and the United States government dictated that children attend Christian-based boarding schools. They were taught to read and write English, and the use of their native language was discouraged or forbidden. Similar cultural oppression unfolded in Australia, where Aboriginal people were forced to adapt to the dominant culture. During World War II, Jewish people went through a hell in Germany particularly and in Europe generally. According to some estimates, millions of Jews were killed, imprisoned, or forced to flee their homes just because of being a minority religion and culture in a Christian Europe. The good news is that today one can argue that cultural imperialism is dead. By that I mean, like the colonialism, cultural imperialism is also a relic of the past. We have learned that colonialism or cultural imperialism is not the right mechanism to achieve any goal. The new terminology has been coined. It is called globalization. It has less baggage attached to it as compared to the cultural imperialism of the yesterday, and it's more civilized. At this point, I would like to point out a less talked about side of the cultural imperialism, that is, domestic cultural imperialism. A domestic cultural imperialism also tries to dominate weaker cultures, just like colonial cultural imperialism, but without a foreign authority involved. The other two elements, use of force and fabrication of moral justifications, still exist in domestic cultural imperialism, just like in the colonial cultural imperialism. The domestic cultural imperialism too tries to influence religion, economic, political system, style of dressing and clothing, art and literature, media, education, health, and languages, just like a colonial imperialism. In a domestic cultural imperialism, a group of society threatens its own weak segment of population to impose their own religion, views, values, political systems, or way of life using physical force or legislative powers. Physical attacks have been reported in domestic cultural imperialism all over the globe. In case of America, bombing of the abortion clinics, attacks on LGBTQ communities, and racial discrimination against Asian and black hijab restriction are an example in European countries of the domestic cultural imperialism. Hijab-wearing members of European society have been banned from public schools, parks, and government jobs by means of legislation or intimidation. In Pakistan, the domestic cultural imperialism is alive and well too. The people of Pakistan fondly speak against colonial cultural imperialism but largely stay mute about domestic cultural imperialism under their nose. The case of Hazara community in Balochistan is a painful example in this regard. Other examples are lynch mobs against Christian communities, forced conversion of Hindus in Sindh, and Shia versus Sunni conflict everywhere in the country. The nation failed to find a solution to a solvable problem of domestic cultural imperialism even after almost a century of independence. There is no silver lining either on the horizon in this regards. A recent headline in domestic cultural imperialism was a girl proposing to her boyfriend in a Lahore university in front of their classmates. Obviously, this was a first in our culture, or at least first time widely shown in media. Therefore, shock waves were felt in our conservative society. A strict action was taken against the couple involved by the college management and they were expelled from the university. The couple got married later. I doubt that in future such marriage proposal can be stopped by government or any other institute by use of force. The reason? It was organic culture behavior. No one forced the couple to propose each other in public. This was a learned behavior which has potential to persist. Only forced social behaviors has potential to be rejected. While talking about learned behavior, I would like to mention a recent study conducted in Japan in observing the behavior of a tribe of monkeys living on an island. This study is called 100 Monkeys Theory. According to 100 Monkeys Theory, it was observed that when a monkey adopted a new skill or a new behavior, other monkeys will not follow the new behavior or trend immediately. It will spread slowly among the monkeys on the island. However, when number of monkeys who adopted the new trend or behavior reached 100, then every monkey on the island adopted the new behavior. Mysteriously, the new behavior will also reach monkeys on other islands too, even those islands were not physically connected with each other. The above example proves that just like our monkey cousins, we the humans too observe and follow other humans in new behaviors and habits. Therefore, use of force is unnecessary to make us adopt a new culture. Only creativity, usefulness, and visual impact is enough to persuade humans to follow another culture. The popularity of Western educational institutes and healthcare worldwide is an example. Every parent's dream is to send their kids to Western schools for education. Parents also feel proud if their kids are fluent in English. This volunteer cultural exchange is a positive thing comparing to the culture enforced through barrel of a gun. This makes the playing field equal for weaker nations as well. We can export our culture to other nations too if creativity and usefulness is present in our culture for others to see. Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and other technology tools are great for this. Let's not tell others what is good for them. Let others observe and make their own decision about what is good for them.